Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am Eric Markovich, and I am representing the defendant, Jordan Abrams. I understand that it has been a very long day, packed with tons of information, but I ask for just a little bit more of your time. You have heard all the information, listened to the entire case, and now it is time for you to decide the fate of Jordan Abrams. Based on the information presented today, the defendant cannot be convicted for his charges of murder and aggravated or reckless manslaughter, failure to report a death of a person, and the possession of a firearm with a purpose to use it unlawfully against another, as the prosecution has failed to meet the burden of proof for all of these charges. Not only did the state not present enough information to render a decision of guilty, but also the defense showed how the defendant was acting in self-defense, not only himself, but specifically in the case of his elderly mother. A person is considered innocent of their forceful actions. They use force upon an intruder who is unlawfully in a dwelling when the defendant reasonably believes that the force upon an intruder is necessary to protect themselves or others. Clearly, this is the situation of the night of the incident, in which Pavano broke into the defendant's home and approached his elderly mother. You heard in the expert testimony from Jesse Ryan, a bona fide expert, that Pavano did break the rear sliding door, clearly indicating a break-in. The defendant served our country in the military and was an honorable man. He would not have deliberately killed a teenager if he was not in fear for himself and his other lives that he is responsible for. Additionally, looters had been prevalent in the neighborhood of Cranberry Shores at the time of the incident. And the defense was extremely fearful of what could happen to his mother, which is why he acted the way he did, anticipating a looter had broken in. The state is bringing multiple charges against the defendant today, of which, for all of them, the defendant is innocent. I would like to remind the jury that the prosecution bears the burden of proof in this case, meaning that if there is a reasonable doubt about any of the elements of the charge, then a verdict of not guilty must be found. The first charge brought against the defendant is murder in the first degree. Based on the evidence presented in this case, the defendant cannot be convicted for this charge. For one, the defendant was acting in self-defense, as he was just trying to protect himself and his mother from intruders. Additionally, in order for a defendant to be found guilty of murder in the first degree, they would have had to purposely or knowingly cause the death of someone, which did not occur in this case. How could someone purposely kill someone if they intruded into their house? You heard in the direct examination of Jordan Abrams that he got up and immediately went to aid his mother. He left his mother and went to the top of the stairs where he saw the intruders standing over her. He did not have a plan to kill the victim. He was merely just trying to save his mother and reacted as any concerned son would. You also heard from the expert testimony of Jesse Ryan that there was not a lot of moonlight in the home due to only a partial amount of the moon being visible, and the sky was partly cloudy, which further diluted the amount of rays that were able to reach the home. He was unable to clearly identify who the victim was, indicating that this was not on purpose and he just was trying to save his mother and acted merely in self-defense. Clearly, a verdict of not guilty must be found regarding the charge of murder in the first degree. Not only did the state fail to meet the burden of proof for murder in the first degree, but it also failed to meet the burden of proof for the lesser offenses, aggravated or reckless manslaughter. For both of these charges, the defendant is innocent once again. In order to be found guilty for these charges, the defendant would have had to recklessly cause the death of someone under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to human life for aggravated manslaughter, or recklessly causing the death of someone. The defendant did not engage in the actions that these charges describe. The question of whether or not the defendant could have used his taser instead of a gun came into question during this trial, but that information is irrelevant. As you heard during the cross-examination of Detective Peeler, the defendant did not see where the intruders were standing when he first obtained a weapon. He was in his room and the door was closed and could not see where they were, indicating that he didn't know whether to grab a taser, and instinctively he got the first weapon that was available to him, which happened to be a gun. Based on this information, the defendant cannot be convicted for these charges of aggravated and reckless manslaughter. Another charge brought against the defendant is the possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose in the second degree. In order for one to be convicted under this charge, they need to knowingly possess a firearm with a purpose to use it unlawfully against the person of another. While the question of whether the defendant possessed a firearm is not in question, it is clear that the defendant did not have a purpose to use it unlawfully against another. The defendant simply was engaging in self-defense and wanted to protect himself and his mother. He did not use a firearm on someone that was entering the house. He used it on someone that had clearly already broken in through the rear door and, based on the situation, appeared to pose a threat to his elderly mother. The final charge being brought against the defendant is failing to report a death in the fourth degree. In order for one to be guilty of this charge, they would have needed to knowingly neglect or refuse to report a death to the police department. The defendant is innocent of this as well, as he told his daughter, who had watched the incident, to call the police. While the police arrived before a call was made, there are several factors that could have delayed a call to the police. The defendant's first priority was to make sure that his mother was okay after being approached, and she was clearly not. She suffered from immense stress and could not even be a part of this trial, as she is still in shock from that day. Additionally, the defendant's household, the demands that he makes are always obeyed by his daughters. So his demand to call the police, he expected to be obeyed, and he does not knowingly neglect to call the police, as he ordered someone who he thought would do it immediately. Based on this information, the defendant cannot be convicted for failing to report a death in the fourth degree. Just to clarify it once more, I would like all of you to put yourselves in the shoes of the defendant. A terrible hurricane has just destroyed much of your town, and tensions are at an all-time high. Looters are prevalent, and the police force has lacked to protect you in the past. You hear a sound, followed by words from your elderly mother. You get right out of bed and grab anything that can protect you. You move as quick as possible to benefit your mother, and then you see someone standing over her. Sounds like self-defense, doesn't it? The decision you make will have a lasting effect, not just on the defendant, but many others around him. He had already lost his spouse to cancer, meaning that his kids will have essentially no parental figures, as one will be dead, and the other will be locked in jail for a crime that they did not commit. Based on everything you have heard, I hope you make the right decision and find the defendant not guilty of all his charges. To conclude, I would like to thank all of you for taking your time and serving the great values of our country's legal and justice system. Thank you very much.